joining us for tonight's show. My name is Keiko Agena, and I am one of the new members of Impro Theater Main Company. Now, we recognize the immense challenges that artists and theater companies are still facing in the light of the pandemic. In our mission to spread joy, Impro has been active throughout the pandemic. In addition to our classes going online, we have presented over 350 live streamed shows for free. So I'm here, you guessed it, to ask for your support in our mission. Now, when you support Impro, you are helping us to offset those costs, to expand our programming, to strengthen our community, and to spread joy. And you're not only helping the performances, you're also helping the school, which is a vital, safe, welcoming place for artists of all levels and backgrounds. And we've made it very easy to make a donation. Just go to improtheater.com, click the donate button, or you can go to, you can text it from your phone, text Impro to 44321. That's 44321, text Impro. And we are a nonprofit organization, so it's completely tax deductible. Well, thank you very much for listening to this pitch and for making a donation. And please enjoy the show.
Impro Theater and the cast and crew of this online performance would like to take this time to honor the indigenous peoples of the ancestral and unceded homelands we each inhabit, and to consider the legacy of colonization. In Los Angeles, we pay our respect to the Gabrielina Tongva peoples. Impro Theater supports the promotion of an anti-racist world, where we recognize diversity, equity, and inclusion as central to our values. We are listening, learning, and growing. We invite you to join us in taking action wherever we can to create a more just world. Our guest today has been seen everything from the Comiskey Method to Jane the Virgin to Reno 911 to Veep, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to embarrass her by reading some of her bio once she's here. Please welcome Julie Lee. Woo!
Hi, Mike.
Hi, Julie. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me here.
I was telling Julie before we went on the air that she's even busier than me, and so I really appreciate you being here.
Oh, thank you.
All right, so let me just brag about you for 1 second, if you would, please. Julie is an Ovation Award nominated actor in Los Angeles. She was in a sketch show that got her into Reno 911 back in the day with Thomas Lennon and Ben Garant and the gang. And since then has done tons of productions as an actor and as a director in Los Angeles, including with Company of Angels, Playground LA, Playground San Francisco, Cold Tofu, of which Julie is the artistic director, East West Players, Here and Now, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's just so many different things. South Coast Rep, Circle X, Rogue Machine, Boston Court. There are some reviews that I could say. Where did they go? I'm trying to find them.
Okay, Mike. That's
I just want to read one, okay? I just want to read one that really struck me, and that is the most impressive, the vivacious Julie Lee, a theatrical Jane of all trades, who absolutely shines, not only as grandma, but in several other roles, as a dry cleaner, a government official, a nurse, a reception, etc., all of which she injects with engaging vitality. So that's great. That was for Hannah and the Dre Gazebo at the Fountain. So, I mean, you are one of those journey person Los Angeles actor people who also happens to be a SoCal native.
Yes. Yeah, I was born in Silver Lake.
And so Silver Lake and then UCSD, I think, University of San Diego. So did you know, like, from the jump that you were an actor? Was that like, you were like, you know, we tall and you were like, I want to do performing, I want to be an actor?
I mean, not in those words. Like as a kid, I'm the youngest. I'm the baby of the family, so I was always big on pleasing everybody and making everyone laugh and be happy. So I think
Guilty.
it started from there. As far as being an actor, I just always loved performing. Any opportunity to do like a sketch in a school play or a church play, was always a huge treat. But you never think that acting would be like a viable path for a future,
Right. I kept on telling people I was going to be a doctor. I just kept on saying it.
And I'm sure now you play one every now and then.
Every now and again, I get to play a doctor. And no, so I'm a multiple transplant. I went from Wisconsin to New York and then to LA. Is it, do you think when you're born here, do you think something about show business is conferred upon you? Like it seems more tangible, more attainable or something? Because I know that growing up in the Midwest, even though I knew I wanted to be an actor, um, it really seemed like what was reachable or attainable was local, a community theater. My mother directed and produced and choreographed a lot of community theater, and my dad would be in shows and that sort of thing. So it seemed like, oh yeah, you can be an actor by doing that sort of thing. But I mean, you also have to be like a lawyer or an engineer or something like that. Do you think growing up in LA, it seemed more like a career opportunity?
For me, not at all, because I didn't know a single person in the business. Yeah, I was born in Silver Lake, but I grew up in La Crescenta, La Cañada, which is like suburbs, so
Yeah,
it was pretty far removed. I mean, geographically, we're very close to Hollywood, but in terms of culture and all that, I was totally far removed from that world and that life.
yeah.
Yeah, actually, it wasn't. I graduated UCSD with a human development major and a minor in law and society. So I was on track to maybe becoming a lawyer or a psychologist or a criminologist or something. But my GPA wasn't very high. So, so my brother advised me to not go to law school because it's so competitive and you're not going to, get anywhere because everyone's going to law school. And so I said I want to be an actor. And then I was just chatting online. This is when AOL chat rooms were really big. And I made a friend with, people online. And I just told this random guy that I'm thinking about being an actor. I've never, he said, "Oh, well, you should check out East West Players." And I'd never heard of anything. I didn't know anything about anything. And so I looked them up. Um, I think the internet was around back then.
Well, if AOL was there, then the web was there. I mean, But you are right because like email and chat rooms came before all the blow up
Like
of
access to
yes,
information and
yes,
everything, right?
yes, yeah,
Yeah. So I
yeah.
think like there was like maybe they listed the class. So I signed up for acting for non-actors, which is like
Oh,
professional
that's
learning skills, acting skills. So that's the first class that I took. And
the gateway. It's the gateway. You're not an actor. It's no pressure. You could just come in and just whatever. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Those are the days when you'd get the information and then you call to enroll. I mean, there was no online payment or anything like
right.
that. You bring your check the first day of class is one of those deals. And that's kind of where it started. From there, the instructor, Rodney Kageyama, who actually just recently passed away a few years ago, he was part of Cold Tofu years back. And he said, if you want to be an actor, you have to do improv. Check out Cold Tofu, which I did. And that started my journey of really checking this world out, of acting, performing, all that.
Yeah, so let's talk about Cold Tofu, of which you are artistic director. East West Players, by the way, just so anybody doesn't know, is a storied theater company here in Los Angeles with a long history, as has Cold Tofu. So on that recommendation, you went and checked out a class and maybe a performance, and then got involved. How did that?
I didn't even know that I didn't know how things worked. So he just said, take a class here. So I thought it was just a place where they taught classes. I didn't even know that Cold Tofu was an improv team. I didn't know. Like, just
Yeah.
take a class. And it wasn't until I finished level one for our showcase that the cast, did a performance at the end of our level one showcase. And I was like, who are these people? They're amazing. Because I had no idea.
Right, right. So your class was like the warm up act for the company.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Like
I didn't.
but that's such a great way to get the students excited about the thing, about the form.
Yet you get to actually see the all-star players. They were amazing. They were so funny. Yeah, that was a cool experience. So then I was just gonna take one class and that was it, but they kept saying, "Oh, good, you passed. Now here's level two." It's like, "Oh, well, okay." So I just kept taking classes, and then I ended up as the artistic director, Mike. I don't know how.
Yeah, it's just they get it gets into your skin and you just can't leave. What was do you remember some of the early like sort of breakthrough moments as a performer that when you because you know we hear as you hear this all the time as do I when persons who are actors who are also improvisers hear from other actors like I could never do that. I can memorize the lines, do the blocking, wear my costume, go on stage. I can do all that, but making it up or improvising, that's just I can't
I
do that.
can't do that.
Do you remember like a moment or maybe moments during your early improv time that where you were like as an actor, you're like, oh, here's a way to be more comfortable with improv, or did it just seem natural?
No, I was always afraid of improv, but there was one moment. The game was, I think, what it was, accent switch or something like that,
Sure.
and the accent was Korean, which
Wow.
which I am. So I'm like, I got this, and that was the first time that I felt like I got this in a game or anything, and then feeling that success and ownership of what you were doing, that comfort, that ease, kind of like, you know, allowed me to feel that way more often later. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, because you found there was sort of a way in, like, oh, I can do this things, then maybe this thing isn't so intimidating after that.
Exactly. And I have to say, when I first started taking classes, everybody had like these Star Trek references, Star Wars. I knew nothing of that culture, so I always felt like I don't know anything. What are people talking about? Like that's where I learned this in improv. I didn't know what that was. So
It is funny because in particularly in games improv and short form improv, cultural references, pop references, cultural references, etc., movies, TV, blah blah blah, what's going on, that kind of stuff is really a very important like currency
yeah, oh
in
yeah,
it
currency.
in getting audiences to react. You know, when you make a reference to something that's happened on television recently, or in the news, or a meme nowadays, etc.
That's a
Um,
great way of putting it, currency.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's also. I mean, some people kind of look down on it as like sort of like a shorthand kind of cheat. You know, if you can make a reference to, some controversy that's in the news, you don't really have to do a lot of like thinking to create some moment or something like that.
I disagree with that. I think that's all. That's those are treats. Those are
Yeah, that
treats. You
that's a good
use all of it, you know?
treats. Yeah, use all.
Yeah.
I no, listen. I agree. Use everything that comes to your hand. I just remember. I remember a period of time when I was doing theater sports way back in the day, um, like cheating. Like I remember hearing a reference to, um, something and not fully knowing what it was, like a band or a song or a movie, and maybe not fully understanding. Maybe I didn't read the book, maybe I didn't see the movie, but knowing that that reference under certain circumstances would
Get
win over
over
the
it.
audience. So what I'm doing, Julie, right
But
now is
see,
I'm admitting to having cheated, is what I'm
but
saying.
that's not cheating though. Because that just knowing that is currency. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I
Yeah.
feel like cheating would be if you like verbatim
Oh, if you,
repeated a joke or
right,
repeated a moment. Right, right.
right.
Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
having that knowledge is that's currency, bro.
Yeah. People used to say to us in the short form days, people used to say to us, man, you must read all the newspapers and watch all the news, like, and it was basically just like you just had to have a passing knowledge of what's going on and then bring it up at the right time in a moment on stage. And it
Which
seemed
which
like,
which which takes a skill.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I remember Stephen Kieran, ugh, one of my favorite people in the world. Um he,
Last
he
week's guest, ladies and gentlemen, last week's guest.
um he taught a class in cold tofu. He taught many classes at cold tofu, and he'd always say, we're in class, and he'll say that the greatest teacher out there, outside,
Yeah,
like you
the world.
learn from the world.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the world and your experience. And just if you are willing to take in the world and take in your observations and then somehow bring them to the state, show the audience a different angle on something that we all walk past every day, but you show the audience a different angle on it because of your character or because of the moment. Suddenly people are like, whoa, wait, whoa, where did that come from? And you're like, it's out there. I'm just shedding a different light on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's what's so cool about what improvisers do is that they use the world as, um, and they use you and her and him and them and like everybody, right, as teachers
Yeah.
of just life. And then adding that layer of a different perspective. I think improvisers have to be like immensely present all the time and make things matter, right?
Yeah, making
To
things
be
matter.
able to bring it into a scene or into a room or into, this space and create new things.
Yeah, there's such a difference between just sort of commenting on something. We use that phrase all the time in improv is like, don't just comment on something, use the thing, like make sense out of it, make it matter to the story that you're trying to tell instead of just sort of lightly on a surface kind of sloughing it off or commenting on it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Critical. So there you are going through levels and doing various showcases at Cold Tofu. Did it just seem like you'd found a home? Did it take a long time before it felt like a home to you? Or
No, the people at Cold Tofu were instantly, first of all, super talented and funny, but very nice. And the entire team felt like role models. They're a little older than I was at the time. Um,
it's okay to say age gets us all.
but now I'm older than they were when they were teaching. Time's a crime. But
Time is a crime. The Julie Lee story. You have to
um,
write that book.
I actually got that quote from a friend of mine, Elaine Cow, who's an amazing actress, but one of our friends. But yes, time is a crime. But everybody was so warm and fun. To be honest with you, like I still did improv out of like with a lot of fear and trepidation. So my favorite time was going out to eat ramen or drink beer after the class or
Sure.
work shows. That's kind of what kept me actually. It was being in Little Tokyo and having ramen and beer afterwards.
That's great.
Then
Yeah,
that's
back in Wisconsin when I first started, we were always performing in like the back rooms of restaurants and things, and just hanging out after. That's what hooked a lot of the people who became longtime performers and improvisers in their life, who never thought they would. They thought they were doing it. I remember so many people that came into our orbit as student, like part-time students, and just the hangout time after and the wisecracking and bonding and all that kind of stuff caused some people to be like, wait a minute, maybe I'll stick around. Yeah, how great that meeting cool people who were nice and who were welcoming helped you stay with it. Yeah, it's
100%.
fantastic.
That's what got me. And then it was actually through Cold Tofu that I did my first sketch show on stage, first time performing for a paying audience.
Nice.
Um, and then it was through that I got my first TV gig on Reno 911.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ben Garanch like showed up to a sketch show, saw the show, and cast I think three or four of us, gave us some parts on Reno 911, like direct offers.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so I thought, if you want to be on TV, you just do 99 seat theater, and then they'll come see you and then give you roles. So then I just did theater for 10 years in 99 seat theaters. Never
Yeah.
happened again. Yeah,
You never.
it doesn't work that way, folks. Just
Yeah, it doesn't.
FYI.
When my a little band of merrymakers moved to New York from Wisconsin, we kind of had all that same kind of serendipity right away. Like we got attention from the press and different festivals and all that sort of stuff. Right around the time that the Reno guys were making some of their early TV shows, and and when we got some attention, we were like, yeah, this, of course, this is the way it always is. You just do your thing, and then people come and they cast you. and and yeah, that is it's not that is the exception that proves the rule that it doesn't normally happen that way. It's so weird that we both had that same kind of experience where, like, early on, we're like, oh yeah, of course. Uh,
Yeah. And then
oh
that
man,
sad realization, which happens kind of late because you think because you're just waiting for it to happen again, because
yeah.
that's how it works. And then it took a while for me to realize that no, that's not how it works.
But you eventually get you eventually do so many plays and stuff, and still do, of course. Um, is there like a particular show or a particular um, a performance or anything that kind of sticks out as I don't know, particularly memorable or special to you? I mean, I would find it hard for you to be able to pick one out because you've done so many. But can you think of anything that there's a story behind?
Yeah, 2019 was actually a banner year for me theatrically. I want to say that every show that I did 4 plays that year, and they were each different, and I grew a lot that year. Let's put it
Yeah,
that way.
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Like everywhere from down at South Coast Rep, and so that's now that for that you're commuting because South Coast is outside. For those of you in the future who are listening to this and not watching, Julie is making quite I can't believe the commute face. Um, but that's a serious commitment to do a run of a show where you've got a couple hours worth of driving back and forth, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and you have to book out where there are pretty much no exceptions. That there are no understudies, so you can't be auditioning for other things, other TV, movie gigs. You can't. You're kind of just out of the running for that whole time.
So people who aren't quite as familiar with the lingo, booking out with your representation, with your agents and stuff, just means that you say to your agents, "Hey, listen, I'm doing this thing. I'm not going to be available for TV shows and commercials and that sort of thing." So it takes for actors. There's always this decision moment when you are about to endeavor in a new project, whether it's a play or an improv show or even your friend's independent film that isn't really going to pay much money. You have to decide, like, wait a minute, so is this a thing that's important enough to me to tell my agents I'm not available for other stuff? And so yeah, does it feel to you? It feels to me always like sort of like an integrity test. like is this project important enough for me to preemptively say no to paying work, right?
Yeah, I think every play is an integrity test. Um, but what's great though is that in LA, like for the smaller theaters anyway, they understand.
Yeah,
So of course it sucks if you have to leave, but I feel like they understand. For a long time, Boston Court, for example, had understudies every show. Of course, like equity rules and everything changed, and so they weren't able to do that for the last couple of years. But I think theaters try really hard to make it easier for their actors to say yes.
yeah.
But yeah, no, it's a challenge. And for an actor, it I guess it's a good problem to have. You're in a play, and you're in the running for something else. That's always good. It's better
Yeah.
than having crickets,
Oh
which
yeah,
has is common as well.
nothing against crickets. Listen, we love crickets. Crickets are an important part of the ecosystem. Do you remember what inspired you to study human behavior and family stuff at college at UCSD? Was there a person or a teacher who kind of convinced you that that would be an interesting major to explore?
No, I was always interested in like people,
Sure.
right? Behaviors, like watching Law and Order, like the people that I gravitated towards were those psychologists that interviewed the criminal and then gave their 2 cents, and it was like that always fascinated me. So I actually majored in psychology down at UCSD, without realizing that psychology is very like medically based, where I thought I would be learning about behavior, but the whole first 2 years I was learning about the the cochlea and the brain. You know what I mean? All these medical terms. I mean, it felt pretty much like pre-med, which
I w-
you're familiar with, I'm sure.
I was pre-med and a psychology major, and yes, the learning that the inner ear ossicles are called the incus, malleus, and stapes, and they are homologous to the jawbone of an alligator, and all that kind of stuff, and getting so I got so deep into the all the pre-med classes, stopped short of one science credit. If I had taken one more science credit, I would have had a Bachelor of Science instead of Bachelor of Arts. But it got it as you get harder and harder in the levels at school, even undergrad, the competition or the perception of competition kind of increases. So I just remember in a class that was the title of the class was Comparative Anatomy of Vertebrates. And I just remember all these uber nerds who sat in the front row and had these gigantic mugs of these gigantic to go, cups of coffee, and like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed at 7:30 in the morning for class. And I just remember dragging myself in there and seeing all of them and thinking like, oh God, I'm not cut out for this, let alone something.
So, so it's specifically to compare the anatomy of like us.
Yeah,
And
you learn that through, it's basically Darwin, right? You learn that this fossil skeleton, that you look at this fossil skeleton, then you look at the skeleton of a whale, and then a sheep, and then a whatever, and you just like, and you see like, oh look, this bone is basically the sheep's version of this bone in a mouse, and blah blah blah, all that kind of thing. Like you're comparing how all the different vertebrates or
yeah,
boned animals um, are similar to one another, so that you can kind of understand
evolution.
how creatures came about. And then
That's cool.
it was pretty cool. Yeah, it was also challenging.
Yeah.
It was hard. Um, but yeah, yes. So you were saying that when you were kind of realizing, oh, wait a minute, there's a lot of medical angle and sciencey stuff to psychology. It's more in depth that way than maybe you'd expected or I expected. Because when I had the same feeling when I started. I was like, oh, human behavior, um, how people interact with each other. That sounds cool.
Fun. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
There's
I think human behavior is fun. That's why I wanted to get into it more. Um, but yeah, so then I mean, I was immediately placed on academic probation, like my first quarter, because it was just all science stuff, and I did not excel in science. Math I was pretty good, but science just didn't stick. Um, I remember I took astronomy. I don't know why I was taking astronomy, but I took a class and I had to retake it twice. Like retake, so I took it 3 times to finally get a passing grade. Um, but yeah, so it was
I
like this.
see you're stronger than I, because I just dropped. There was a physics level that I was just like, all right, thanks. I'm just going to leave then. Fine. Not coming back. And I didn't go back. I was like, that's just not going to be on
See,
my.
that's smart. That is smart because I waited until the grades came out, and then you have no choice but to retake it, so that doesn't mess up your GPA too much. I remember I called this girl, this friend of mine who was in the same class, and I called her and I go, "Oh hey Yuna, when's our midterm for astronomy 5?" And she goes, last Wednesday."
Oh my
And I was like, "Oh,
gosh.
okay,
um,
thank
all right. Maybe academic probation was called for in
you."
that case.
So, but I stuck with it because you know I'm kind of like driftwood, just going with whatever happens.
I see.
And then
I see. Wherever
yeah,
wherever the water takes you. Sure.
yeah, and it wasn't until my final quarter junior year when I was like, I gotta do something about this. And human development actually, it was like every class that I took care of all the hardest classes of human development, and then all the classes that were left was teaching in a school, which was awesome.
Yeah.
learning about legalese, which I enjoyed, learning about words and how people communicate and how they're used, some anthropology. And it was like, I should have majored in this
Cool.
to begin with because it was so much more fun. And I was getting A's in those classes because it's the stuff that I enjoyed, you know?
Yeah. Well, that sounds like what the academic life is supposed to do. It's supposed to steer you, in a way that causes you to maybe be driftwood for a minute, but then finally find like a landing spot. I remember a guidance person saying to me when I went to a some teacher said to me like, well, you keep on asking for extensions on papers. You need help buckling down and getting things done or something like that. And so I went to this guy. I was like, all right, fine. I'll go to a guidance counselor person and ask for advice. And I said, I do a lot of things last minute. And one of my professors told me that I should, take things a little bit at a time and start working on it early. What's your advice? And the guidance person literally said to me, I don't know, maybe you succeed. Yeah, see, your grades are pretty good. Maybe you do well waiting to the last minute to do things. That was their guidance to me was, you're a last minute person. So keep going, buddy. Oh my gosh.
But I mean, but was that helpful? Did it validate your way of being?
I mean, it told me that what I was doing. I mean, it reminded me. I guess it didn't reveal, but it reminded me that what I was doing was, uh, I don't know, dotting the i's and crossing the t's and getting decent grades in the university system. But it didn't help me in life because I I am constantly recriminating myself for not getting something done on time or that sort of thing. Like I'm always, yeah, I'm very harsh on myself about that.
I wonder if that's part of the reason why we're both always so busy. 'Cause
I think we might have tapped into something, folks. A couple of psychology majors figuring it out. Um, Julie, speak Korean. Did you grow up speaking Korean? Were you bilingual as a child?
yeah, I was bilingual. Like I'm not fluent in Korean, but if you give me time, I can, call up my mom and have her read the lines to me, and then
Have
I
you
can.
have you done plays in Korean, or
Well,
jobs or
so I have actually Hannah and the Dread Gazebo. Most of my roles were in Korean,
were
so
speaking Korean?
I had to learn a lot of Korean for that. And then after Hannah and the Dread Gazebo at the Fountain Theater, co-produced with East West Players, I went down to South Coast Rep, and I had a couple of like pretty much monologues in Korean.
Fantastic.
Yeah, but it's a lot of work, because even
Yeah,
though like the sounds come out, the way the sounds come out, it still feels foreign because it's not about like ordering food, and that's what my mouth is used to, and
yeah.
that's pretty much it. So yeah, it takes a lot of work to get to a level where it's believable that my character is fluent and Korean native.
Do you think your standards for that on stage, like for example at South Coast Rep or something, are high, your own personal standards are higher than it would be if you were just doing 35 takes of a scene in Korean for a movie or for a TV show? In other words, being on stage, being live, being in front of people, having to, have the flow of the play, is it harder and therefore your standards are higher than it would be for a TV or film job?
No, I think my standards would be the same. I mean, the goal is to sound like the character authentically, right? If the character's a native speaker, you better sound like a native speaker. I think when you're doing a TV or, film and you're speaking Korean, I feel like I have a lot less control because there's less time to get good at it.
Yeah,
So a lot of times I'll feel not so good about my work, but I feel like the standard's still there.
sure,
I just need the time to reach it.
sure. And you're doing improv a lot. You're the artistic director at Cold Tofu, and you're teaching and you're performing and etc. Um, is it hard? Is it weird? Is it a challenge to shift gears and suddenly have this big script in front of you and have to learn lines and learn a play all over again, or is it at this point just like jumping on your horse and riding it again or something like that?
I think I've done more plays than improv. Like hours spent in my life have been more on scripted material than improv. So it's usually a shift back into improv.
Ah,
than the other way around, which is good, I think. Because yeah, right, because with improv, as long as you're supported by your players, you just kind of like go with it and you're good. You know what I
There's
mean?
that driftwood again.
Yeah.
Um, no, but it does feel like you're crowd surfing when an improv scene or an improvised play is going well. It does feel like everybody is sort of holding one another up with all their hands, like an old Theater 101 trust exercise or something.
So I've heard. I've never taken Theater 101, but yes, I've heard.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you about that. What's your experience with taking theater and drama classes? Did you take anything while in college
I
or?
did. I took Theater 1 because once I shifted from psychology to human development, I it was so easy. I had time to take whatever I wanted as an elective. So I took Theater 1 and I loved it. Loved it. Um, yeah.
And I see that you are a fellow Sam Christensen student, as
Yeah.
well as I. Yeah, Sam was the best. He's come up a lot in my Impro Talk interviews because Sam was just an amazing teacher, and his technique was to help us identify who we are to the outside world and understand what our core essences are that we bring into the room, um, and therefore know how to bring that to our roles. Do you have any Sam stories or experiences in class that
You
come
know
to mind?
what I just remember about Sam is that he really made the work important and valuable and necessary. And I think that like that's the word because he really teaches you that each individual is teaching everyone else about humanity.
Yeah.
Right. And so we as artists, like how valuable and necessary that is. And it was fun to hear his like how he'd what's the word where you'd have like a phrase to describe your essence.
Well, just like your essence statements, sure. Your mantra. Yeah, he
Or
talked about a mantra word or your essence statements. Do you remember any of your essence
I
statements?
remember one, it was whiskey and lemonade, and
Oh,
that was
that's
it.
great.
I
That's a
was like,
great one.
yeah, that makes sense to me.
Oh, that's a great one. Um, yeah, he was the best, and so helpful in helping actors. Some actors would walk into his studio thinking like, "Well, I'm clearly a leading man type," and everybody outside of them would be like, "I don't know if that's what you should be thinking of yourself as," and it would just help you hone in on who you are, and it was yeah,
Yeah. I mean, what's really cool is that he has the rest of the class, before they know you, before you open your mouth, use words to describe you, right?
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, and it was interesting to me the polar opposite impression of me just without talking and just sitting there and then me talking. It was like polar opposite impressions of me, and that kind of showed me who I was. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I use that in improv classes. I get people to try some of that kind of stuff in order to understand, like, because I guess I'm talking to our listeners and our viewers right now, Julie. But when people are improvising, they feel this pressure to say a lot of words. They feel this pressure to like make things go fast and talk a lot and talk loud. And part of teaching acting and teaching improv is getting performers to understand that who they are, just their very presence, tells a lot and does a lot of the work. Yeah. So knowing how you appear to people when you're on stage or when you're in front of a camera is critical to helping you understand what's being told without you even having to do anything.
Yeah, because so much of that first impression or second or third is nonverbal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that, yeah, that.
Um, yeah. It's critical to understand the nonverbal aspect of things. What's it like being? Uh, First of all, I forgot to ask you about. I forgot to mention this. I recently did an episode of This Is Us, and I see that you did an episode of This Is Us. So that's another thing we have in common. I just wanted to point that out.
Oh, cool.
Um,
What did you do?
it was a really small role. I was part of the mini little orchestra or string quartet. There were only three of us for a wedding, and
Do you
I
play?
No, that was the other
Oh,
thing. It literally said in the breakdown, in the character description, it said does not need to know how to play cello. Um, but the kind of the funny thing about it was that this is another thing that people might not be aware of is that when we lately in the last few years because of how Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and et cetera has blown up, there was a period of time where people were saying like, hey, I'm auditioning for a McDonald's commercial and I get to do this, and then McDonald's would say like, wait, you can't post that, we don't want people to know about that yet. And the same goes for television and film and et cetera. We're so used to being sworn to secrecy about projects that I completely lost track of when this episode was going to air. And so a friend of mine texted me and said, hey, you were on This Is Us tonight. And I was like, oh man, I didn't even know.
did you get a chance to? I'm sure you've since gotten a chance to see.
Still haven't seen it. It's been about a
You're
month.
kidding.
Still haven't seen it. No.
I'm sure you
Uh,
can find it on the
oh no,
dark web.
I could find it. I just haven't. I haven't. Did you
I
say you could find it on the dark web? Yes,
don't know how people get things done,
you
but
could use some Bitcoin to discover it. But yeah, so you've directed a lot of stuff. Have you found it like herding cats to try to get actors to not immediately post social media stuff or blah 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 before you kind of
oh,
want it?
no. I mean, the stuff that I direct, it's actually blown up during Zoom.
Yeah,
I've directed a few like sketches or short plays or readings and workshops and things like that. But on Zoom, it's really blown up. And I think in theater, it's kind of the opposite, where you want to get as much attention as possible because it's not, it's not really for mass consumption the way TV and commercials are. You know what I mean?
sure. Yeah,
Want to get
absolutely.
as many eyes and ears as possible on these projects. Yeah.
Is there something about directing as a person who started as a performer and then moved into, is there something about directing that you can kind of put your finger on apart from being like managing all the moving parts? Is there something you can put your finger on about directing that's appealing or that's interesting or keeps you wanting to do more?
Yeah. Like when we're reading a script, right? And something about what just happened didn't seem real or it felt manufactured or something just didn't work. I like investigating why that is.
Ah,
It's either and to be honest, at least in my approach, it's rarely the writing. I mean, sometimes it is, but it's rarely the writing. And I feel like it's our job as the director and the actors to figure out like what was the writer's intention, like what was the truth for the writer when they created this moment.
what do we have to do with this scene to make it believable to us so that it then will be believable to the audience?
Yeah, and it's usually subtext or the intention of the actor of what they're trying to achieve in that moment. I think one of the most painful things as an actor is when I'm saying words and I don't really know what it means, but I know like the language, so I know the cadence should sound like this, right?
Sure, yeah.
But I don't really know what's going on here. Like that's a horrible feeling when I resort to that because I don't know what's going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and there's another thing that a lot of people don't realize, particularly about plays. There's a lot of old plays. The script that gets published is actually a transcript of an early performance. There are times that there are stage directions and comments about how a line is read and that sort of thing that are literally just the notes from a stage manager who's written down what happened while they were like busy, writing down what happened, and then you've got performers who kind of don't understand that the words are conveying meaning, and that sometimes stage directions and punctuation and the way the words are spaced on the page, sometimes that isn't particularly helpful in telling the story, but the words themselves are what the writer intended. And there's some other kind of like detritus in there that is a function of it having been passed down and edited and published and that sort of thing. Um,
That's so interesting. I've mostly done world premieres or original
modern,
works,
yeah, modern stuff,
modern
sure.
plays, yeah, which is, I mean, playwrights write a lot now, like about how, like about how things should be done.
More often helpful or more often harmful working directly with a writer while you're directing something?
Oh, with. I mean, helpful working with.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Of
I
course
mean,
it
I know
depends.
that. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
It depends on the writer too, but but yeah, almost always it's better with.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes
And
directors are like, "All right, I've got your script. You know, I'm going to do what I want to do with it. And then other directors, I'm sure, are much more like, hey, let's do this together. I mean, it must be fantastic to have the writer in the room so you can say like, hey, Barbara, what did you mean by that?
oh yeah, it's great. Or if an actor asks a question and I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Hey, Nina, can you hop on? Because on Zoom, like
Oh, on
playwrights are
Zoom,
usually
right,
like
right, of
Zoom
course,
like
of
mute
course.
and yeah, and they'll come on. Yeah, so in that line, and it's like great, perfect. Thank you so much. It's fantastic. Um, yeah, I think when it's difficult is when because playwrights have an intention of the character of what they've written, and there's a process between a director and actor and how to get an actor to a certain point, or you know what I mean. And a lot of times, you have to use language that isn't going to be the final product, right? Like the final version of the character, because you want to experiment. And I think sometimes it's tricky when playwrights don't understand that there's that process that happens, and they think that notes or suggestions are like this is how you should do it, when that's not at all. If that makes sense. When you're
Right,
working with a
that's
character,
really right. That's critical to understand that it's that the character is evolving up until the point where we're actually going to do the play. We're discovering who the character is together.
yeah.
That must be a place where for you as a director, your improvisational training, experience, and teaching is must be a fantastic tool.
Oh yeah, to always be kind of present and taking care of things as they happen, right? Like I think that's what we always have to. We're trained to do that. We
Yeah.
see a trigger or like a stimulus, and then we address it right then and
Right.
there.
Right. Right. I think stimulus is a much more a much more friendly term, I think, than trigger. We see a trigger. Oh.
But we see a thing, right? And then and that's kind of what I teach when I teach improv, because a lot of times how you were saying improvisers will like think filling the space and talking is how you improvise, right? When that happens, I mean, there's just so much you kind of sweep so much under the rug as if nothing ever happened.
Mm.
Right? And that's how like storylines kind of devolve, and it's hard to follow like the arc of a story, and like making things matter as things come in.
One of the hardest things to teach is using what is there and just going deeper with what is there instead of trying to invent a new shiny thing. It's so hard to convince some, not always, but often it's hard to convince somebody like, look, that's enough. That's enough. What's going on right now is enough. You could just stay with that.
Yeah, I think we should do more exercises about how like this pen is enough. Like you
Oh
do a whole
yeah.
scene about this pen and just focus on the pen.
I have
And of
I,
course relationship.
I have a class that's all about that. And it's just, yeah, it's just about just getting into the simple things that are already kind of present and exploring them uh, more deeply or something. Um, Julie, what is it about somebody who's growing up in Southern California and spent most of their life or all of their life here that that is that a non-native like me wouldn't get? What I've been here 15 years. Is there anything as a is there any Southern SoCal pride or SoCal um, I don't know uh, you're not a native, you wouldn't get it kind of thing that comes to mind about Southern California?
Well, I don't know if there's I think what's funny is that LA has this reputation, right? And it's like, well, usually the people who have that impression of LA, they've surrounded themselves with people who aren't from LA,
Haha,
right?
that's it. That's
So,
it.
yeah, and it wasn't until my first acting class. It was a commercial acting class, so it wasn't like a community kind of, you know what I mean? It was like a Hollywood class, right?
Right.
And like we were giving the instructor our phone numbers and all these area codes. I was like, what? Where are these people from? Oh, that's Hollywood. I mean, so that was my introduction to Hollywood is transplants that come to,
Yeah.
which is I think an opposite impression from people who come. They think, oh, this is LA, right?
Yeah.
Like Hollywood is LA.
Right, right. Hollywood, the industry, as opposed to Hollywood, the neighborhood. But yes, yeah, exact. That's exactly it. Because I remember when I first started spending time here, because I was kind of bi-coastal for a minute, and I would kind of get sort of seduced into this idea that everybody had this sort of transplanted, uh, modern era gold rush, come to Southern California to see what they could find kind of attitude, and then you'd meet somebody who was just like, I don't know, more relaxed or something. I don't know how to describe it, but somebody who was just sort of more centered or something, and you'd be like, what's your deal? And then you find out like,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
I I admire people who make the move because if I had to move to pursue acting, I probably wouldn't have done that, you know? Because yeah, yeah, anyway. Um, but most of my friends who are in the business are also LA natives. So we all relate to each other really well. And I think a big part of that is that our families are still here. So there's not
right,
disconnect in pursuing this with what home me is and what it means.
right. It doesn't feel like you're an astronaut or something leaving home to strike it rich or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is a critical thing. I don't think I've ever heard anyone put it that way. That's such a great way to put it. Because, like, I just know that for going home to Wisconsin,
For
people
the
would say like,
holidays.
yeah, yeah. People say, well, what are you up to? Like, like, oh, I'm living in New York being an actor, or I'm living in LA being an actor or something. And people would just be like, well, what have I seen you on? Or something like that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, but like something that I don't envy. I mean, there are many things that I don't envy about transplants that have to kind of make the move to do this. Well, actually, I'll start with something that I do envy is that you've made the jump, so all your decisions are surrounding that choice.
hmm,
You know what I mean? You're a lot more focused on the reason you're here and your goals.
sure,
Um,
maybe, yeah.
I feel, and there are fewer distractions. These are generalizations, obviously, but for,
Yeah, yeah, like you probably, if you've made the move and to put it in the words of a friend of mine, thrown everything into the river and moved to LA, probably you're not seeking a lot of other options. Probably you're more determined. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
uh,
Um,
something that I don't envy is, just like the cost of having to visit your family for the holidays.
yeah.
I mean, that's expensive to do that once or twice a year or more. Like for me, it's just like a 15-minute drive to my brother's house or an hour-long drive to my parents' house. You know what I mean? So it's just nice to have my family here with me.
Yeah. Are there, it is. It is. I'm envious of that. Um, so Cold Tofu and Impro did a co-production thing a few months back, where you did, or I can't remember if it was a co-production or if it was just a Cold Tofu show that we put on our Twitch. But so you did plays that were inspired by the work of some writers. Can you talk about how that process worked and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I was talking with Dan O'Connor. We had a couple of Zoom meetings. That man is so busy. He's a busy
Dan
man.
Dan's very busy. So there's this show format called Script Tease that Naomi Sneakus turned us on to, where you get the beginning lines of a play or a
First two
screenplay.
pages.
First two pages. There it is.
First two
Yeah.
pages. Yeah.
And then you improvise the rest of the script or the project, whatever it is. And you all took it on and did it. Talk about how it worked and everything for you.
Yeah, it was awesome. I love plays. So for me, having a jumping off point be a play, I felt a lot more grounded in that starting point, like having some of
Sure.
the characters defined. I think it's a it's just easier to jump off. And there's so much freedom because in the first 2 pages, usually not much has happened except maybe like one thing. So you're
Yeah.
introduced to some of the players, and then like one thing happens. And I think usually like the third page is when you find out what happened because of that thing that happened. But now the improvisers are making up what happened because of that thing that happened, you know?
So Ken Yamamoto and Sharon Wong were the cold tofu producers or hosts, and you, right? Because you're the
For the scriptees,
yeah. Is that not right? Did I get that wrong?
no, for the scriptees, the hosts, I think it was me for the host of it. The the writers or the host?
Oh no, I'm trying to remember the writers.
Oh, the writers, yes. It was actually his father-daughter team. Rosie Narasaki and
Right, right,
yeah.
right. The Narsakis. Forgive me for
Yes,
Ken
yes,
and
yes.
Sharon.
Yeah.
And did that see was that like sort of uh, a big departure that doing that was a big departure from short form kind of stuff. You mentioned that it felt like sort of things get sort of more grounded when you get going, or did it feel like, hey, we're just gonna jump right in? Did you try to figure out how to get a better handle on it than you would have for a short form show? Or
Yeah. I mean, long form and short form are very different just in terms of setting up the groundwork and the stamina you need for the characters and what's going on. We rehearsed, I want to say, for 2 months prior to that show because we were on hiatus for a couple of years. 2019, I was doing plays. Mike Palma, who's the associate artistic director, was also doing plays, and so we're kind of taking a break from performing. And then the pandemic, 2020 was going to be a banner year for Cold Tofu, and then you know, um, so it had been a while since we performed or did any improv together at
wow, I
all.
didn't I didn't know that. I didn't know that you had been on hiatus for so long before that show. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and this was our first show back, really. And just learning the format with Dan, trying to translate that from a live show into a Zoom show. That was really fun trying to figure out how to do that. Like so the idea of sharing screen for the first 2 pages, everybody's literally on the same page and screen as we're reading along. And then the screen, stops share screen and it's just the actors, right?
Yeah.
As characters. Like that was a fun discovery and trying to like workshop the format.
I remember Ken and Rosie being like sort of delighted at how crazy everything got, and how people took what they had started with and just went for it and that sort of thing. Um, that
Yeah,
seemed
and
like a really
it was through that I found out that Dan and Ken knew each other from the Bay Area from like 30 years ago or something crazy like that. When they were
that's
just
wild.
they were just kids when they knew each other. Uh, it's always fun to hear
Cool.
stories of like, because people through different pathways and then just seeing how everyone's so connected.
That's what happens when you're a transplant. I remember when I first got here, I'd go to like somebody's show thinking that I don't know, narcissistically thinking that I would be the only person that they knew from New York or from wherever else I knew them from. And I'd get there and it would be like, wait a minute, you're here? You're here? You're here? Like, and that kept on happening for a few years. How do you know so and so? How do you know? Like, it was crazy how I guess, that's probably something that makes sense being what LA is and the industry is.
Yeah, yeah. But how wonderful is that? I think that's
It's
so fun.
amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. Speaking of connections, Julie has recently become an official company member at Impro Theater, which is amazing and wonderful. She's just finding out about it right now. I've just told her for the first time. Um, do
That's
you
wild, Mike. It's wild. It is
welcome?
effing wild. I want to say about I think at least half the main company of Impro have come into Cold Tofu to teach workshops, right? And then and just seeing Impro perform and the main stage shows, being constantly blown away. And then being asked to do play unscripted, I was
Yeah, I was
like,
just gonna say you came and did some play unscripted with us, which was wonderful.
and it was just like anxiety central for the weeks like leading up to the show. But yeah, I mean, to talk about that crowd surfing feeling, oh man, I have to say, when you have so much anxiety as a performer like I do, but you work with people like yourself at Impro, I mean, it really does feel like crowd surfing, and it can be just a lot of fun. And I have to say, it was one of the most like rewarding experiences.
Uh, and
That's a testament to the Impro cast. It was really just crowd surfing on my part. Yeah, that was a super fun show.
well, we're speaking for Impro, the organization, and for my fellow old timer company members. We're delighted about this new iteration of the company. It's very exciting what we're all going to do, and happy that you could be part of it as well. So it's
Thank you.
exciting.
Yeah.
Um, and that's our time for Impro Talk for this week. Do you have any, before we go, let me just
Uh-oh.
ask, because you've been doing improv for so long and teaching improv and acting, what are your thoughts for either a young person or a person who is not necessarily young but new to acting or improv or something? Do you have thoughts? Do you have any sort of advice, catchphrases, or go get 'ems or anything for them?
I mean, I think that the biggest thing is to just be a constant student and learner and listen. Like even if you're not interested in directing, watch the director, watch the playwright, see how they process and do their work, because that can only make you better as an actor, not only as a performer, as an artist, but also like to see how things work together and just be a better like a part of that machine, right? To see and be more conscientious, and you know what I mean? Um,
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
just pay attention and listen. Respect and be grateful for the administrators. It's a lot of work.
And the technicians. Yeah.
And the technicians, yeah, all that behind the scenes stuff. I think just always be grateful and just notice the work that they're doing. That will only feed your work as an artist, to recognize all that stuff.
That is really great advice. Notice the work that's going on because a lot of it is being done on your behalf for to make you look better, seem better. Thank you, Julie Lee.
Thank you, Mike Frog. What a
Uh,
pleasure. We've never
thank.
actually had a conversation like
This is a
really.
this is our first real legit conversation.
Hi.
Thank you. I'm glad people could be here. And Julie will be appearing with Impro Theater's main company in Jane Austen Unscripted at the Gary Marshall Theater, April 16th to May 8th. Go to garymarshalltheater.org for tickets. And we'll see you next week for more Impro Talk. And if this is the future and you're listening as a podcast, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching Impro Talk. Julie Lee, we'll see you around.
Thank you, Mike. Bye.
Bye.